Hey y'all, thanks for coming. I am a little nervous, I haven't done this before. So I wonder, I'm a licensed mental health therapist here in Poulsbo, Washington, and I wonder how it would feel for all of us just to take a deep breath. So I'm gonna count to 3. We can inhale through our nose together. We'll hold it for a second and then we'll exhale. So 1, 2, 3, inhale through your nose. Hold it, exhale. Maybe just check in on your heart rate, on your body. As we step into the issue of corruption, I'm aware that in our country and worldwide, there's a lot of thematic elements that fit under this word corruption. And as I was thinking about it, one of the first things I wanted to do today was just honor the land we're on. We're in Suquamish tribal territory, and Cedar and Salt is the name of my counseling collective that I'm a part of in honor of the Suquamish tribe. So for the cedar trees they built their longhouses out of, and for the salt waters here. So I want to honor them and just acknowledge where we're at today. As we step into this subject of corruption, I think about our hearts, our minds, our bodies, our spirits, and I think about rupture that moves towards repair and resiliency. So there's this guy, Ignacio Martin Barro. He was living in El Salvador, and he was a Jesuit priest and a liberation psychologist. And he said, "The homeostatic vision leads us to distrust everything that is change and disequilibrium, to think badly of all that represents rupture, conflict, and crisis. From this perspective, it becomes hard, more or less implicitly, so kind of under in our subconscious, for the disequilibrium inherent in social struggle not to be interpreted as a form of personal disorder." And then in parentheses he says, "Do we not speak of people who have lost their balance? And then for the conflicts generated by overthrowing the social order not to be considered as pathological." So I take that to mean as a foundation from where I'm coming from, that I don't want to be in a therapeutic practice that just encourages people to accept the status quo or the structural norms. And to address corruption will create disruption. It will create fractures, but those fractures hopefully can be where we tell a truer story and we come together. So I actually have a lot of hope in that. James Baldwin said, "History, as nearly no one seems to know, is not merely something to be read, and it does not refer merely or even principally to the past. On the contrary, the great force of history comes from the fact that we carry it within us, are unconsciously controlled by it in many ways, and history is literally present in all that we do." And so when I think of the theme of corruption, as we just set the stage for stepping in, we all have a story. We all have a place, a culture, ethnicity where we come from, whether it's Irish, German, Chinese. For me, my culture is, my dad's German, and I found out English, Wales. My mom is Mexican, indigenous, and then Filipino, and some other African and some other nationalities. So we all have these places where our stories come from. And inside of those stories, we have a larger story. So if you're Irish, you have a story of immigrating here. And what was that story of immigration? In my case, my dad's family immigrated from they were Germans from Russia, from the Black Sea, the Baltic Sea. And they came over and they settled in North Dakota, and then they took people's land when they came over. So it's not always clean. There's multiple things happening in each of our stories. And then my mom's family, my great-grandfather was killed on the border by Texas Rangers. And my mom's family worked in the fields in California. And my grandma was a nanny for a rich white family in California. And then my grandpa moved up the ladder in the military and eventually worked on space shuttle. So there's stories that come from stories why we arrived here, stories why we stay here. And so I think those are important to note when we talk about corruption, that it's not pointing a finger at one person or the other. It's really recognizing where all our stories land in pieces of the collective larger story. So I like to think of these three aspects to tell a truer story. The idea of plática, which is like heart-to-heart listening. The idea of testimonio, it's sharing and telling and expressing the stories in the presence of a collective strategy for survival. It's resistance and refusal rooted in indigenous traditions and Latin American social movements. And confianza, trust, confidence, and inclusion. So that's kind of where I'm coming from today as I step in here with you all. Corruption is a rupture in the fabric of our society. It's a collective rupture. We think about COVID-19. We just passed through all of that together. And I mean, it was a worldwide phenomenon. So it's a traumatic experience that affects entire people groups, communities, or societies, the size and scope of which shatter the very fabric of the communities impacted. It not only brings distress and negative consequences to individuals, but it also changes the fabric of a community, a sense of life before and a life after the cataclysmic event. A collective narrative weaves the connection between trauma, memory, and ontological security. Chosen traumas are conceptualized as narratives, emphasizing that walking through blood is necessary on the path to freedom, independence, and group security. So as a group, maybe Poulsbo's one cultural place, maybe you're from Seattle, maybe you're from Ballard, maybe you're from, there's stories of people that live on Finn Hill, which when the Norwegians came and settled here, they sent the Finns up to that hill, literally. The Finns and the Danish folks up on Finn Hill. The road is called that. So there's a story that goes with that. So I think, just to emphasize that again, that we have corruption as part of the fabric of our society. Places where we've been ruptured and already split apart from one another. Here's some of my definitions. Corruption is the process by which you engage your heart, mind, body, and spirit less. You ask less of yourself as a human to know another human. As you engage less of your heart, mind, body, and spirit, then you find yourself open to choices and open to options which really don't align with your core values and faith. I wonder if you can all just take a deep breath. There's no requirement. These are my ideas about corruption, and so I don't presume that you may have the same. So where do you feel alignment with this statement? Where do you feel maybe dissonance or disagreement with what I've said? Where do you feel like, oh, I don't actually feel attached to that at all? Like, I think those are places you can like settle and notice. And all of those responses are to be honored. I'll read it again. What is your investment in ignorance? Corruption is the process by which you engage your heart, mind, body, and spirit less. You ask less of yourself as a human to know another human. As you engage less of your heart, mind, body, and spirit, then you find yourself open to choices and open to options which really don't align with your core values and faith, or maybe it's not faith for you even. What determines your investment in living well with integrity and authenticity? An extra engagement of disembodied systems. So how do we engage systems? I think of government. I think no matter where you land on the scale, government can seem to be really disembodied. It feels mechanical. We often forget that there's humans inside of it. An extra engagement of disembodied systems, such as government, schools, and healthcare. And when you become more engaged, you begin to corrupt or disrupt those systems that see you as less than human. The systems don't find they can survive survive their own exposed rot. So what happens when you, quote unquote, do the opposite? When you become more, allow yourself to feel more human, to allow yourself to feel more joy, more sadness, more anger. When you allow yourself to show up as who you are, and that's dangerous. Not everyone in this room can always show up. It's not safe. When you become more engaged, I think the systems often think that we're corrupting them, that we're bringing to them a level of disruption that they don't like. So I just ask you to take another deep breath. And where do you resonate with what I've said? Where do you find, I don't agree with that at all. Maybe it's part of it. Where do you find just like, hey, I don't really care? And just lean into those spaces, those feelings. I think the impact of corruption, there's a couple things. Like I like to think of there's like hurt versus harm. So heart, mind, body, and spirit, I think of this inevitable in any relationship, in any friendship. You may cause someone else painful feelings, they may cause you painful feelings, and it hurts. It hurts. And it doesn't feel good. And I think of harm as a violation of a person's dignity. For me, it's taking energy non-consensually from someone. Like you don't actually have permission to take what you took from them. And so how do individual hurts, like the first one, add to or cement structural power, like government or healthcare, or I don't know, racism in the schools, or people that have so-called disabilities, how are they seen? People with other types of bodies, and our experience and perspective of them. So I think sometimes we may be hurt by someone and it will feel like harm because we have all those stories collected in us and it hits on that nerve. And so then what do we do with that? So again, they're inevitable in any relationship. And I don't know, just take a moment to think, like, where can you remember hurting someone? Where can you remember harming someone? Where can you remember being hurt? Where can you remember being harmed? I think of our bodies when I think of this conversation. Our nervous systems and relationships move through moments of coherence and moments of chaos. So there's the moment of like coming in even to vibe here, and we're all kind of mingling randomly. And I don't know if I would call that chaos, but it's not ordered. It's not like you have to talk to this person and this person and this person. And then, but there is the process of finding a seat. Like we're all seated somewhere, or maybe standing in the back. We don't have people randomly standing up in the middle. So there's some order to that. Safe connection allows space for holding these pendulations, and what the YouTube video is just the constant movement of these balls on the string, and not needing to fix or appease, but to allow the emotions and experiences to ride out until coherence is found again. So there's chaos in that. When we walk through emotions, when we walk through spaces and we're more in our bodies, honestly, I don't like to feel bad. I don't know how many of you guys do. But sometimes I actually am more familiar with feeling discontent or angry. And sometimes joy or happiness actually feels uncomfortable. So what do you do when you have those competing feelings, or society's telling you like, hey, you gotta feel good about this, and you're like, oh, I don't feel good about that at all. Even though technically, quote unquote, it is something good, do you allow yourself to kind of move through those emotions and then find balance again? And I think what corruption does is it disrupts our bodies. We become disengaged from our bodies, and then we kind of we have trauma responses, I think, to that. So you might just be frozen, experience being frozen, or you might experience wanting to run away. Or you might experience, like, I don't know if anybody's ever spaced out while they're driving. Like you're driving, you're like, oh, I don't even remember stopping at that stop sign. Did I stop? Like that kind of feeling of being not connected to your body. Oh, I'm gonna go one more. So I think, does anybody know about your vagus nerve? So your vagus nerve, and then so in your gut is actually your second brain. You have neurons in your gut. And so when people say I have a gut feeling, they really do. Your brain is actually your gut brain is sending signals to this brain, and you're reacting and responding. So here's a polyvagal chart, and I could geek out on this a lot. You can kind of see all of the things that go on here. And this is adapted from Ruby Jo Walker, but at the top we have freeze. When you feel threatened, you might feel dissociation or disconnected from your body, numbness, depression. You may not feel pain. Helplessness, shame, shutdown, hopelessness. And even though you might not feel like you're going to die, you might just kind of be frozen in that state. And it might be confusing. And it feels like you can't. In the middle, we have fight. So movement towards or movement away. Rage, anger, irritation, frustration, panic, fear, anxiety, worry, and concern. And this is your sympathetic danger zone for your body. And you're hyper aroused. So imagine heart rate increase. Imagine ready to go. And in the bottom, they have this on the bottom here. In some places, social engagement can be in the middle. It's different shaped. But it's calmness, you're connected, you're settled, you're grounded. You have a sense of curiosity. Maybe you have a sense of curiosity right now. Or maybe you're on guard. You're like, what is she going to say about corruption? I don't know why I came. You could have any of these feelings right now. You have access to compassion. You're mindful in the present. So you can kind of see some of the physical aspects of what happens in these different states when your vagus nerve is engaged in different ways. So I don't know if you guys can find, some of us operate in different parts of this system. So trauma decontextualized over time in a family can look like family traits. And trauma decontextualized in a people can look like culture. So I love Resmaa Menakem and what he says about this. And so when we think about corruption, how has corruption actually been decontextualized to fit into your family or to fit into your culture or the story of maybe your business or your community? And just as we end here, I just want to ask you these 3 questions. And then we'll have Q&A and discussion afterwards. But what do you notice in your body right now? And you may be like, why are you asking me that question? This is not a therapy session. But I am a therapist, so I'm asking it. But what do you notice? Is your heart rate increased? Some people, when they check in on their heart, they can't even feel that it's beating when they're feeling in a trauma state. Is your stomach gurgling? Why is intergenerational story important? Why might that be important to what we're talking about in light of corruption? How have you maybe participated in corruption? How have you fought against corruption? How have you maybe watched corruption? And where might that play out in not only your story, but in past stories of your family? And then therefore, why does collective story matter? So as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you. And I think we're going to have Q&A, but why don't we just take a couple more breaths together? And sometimes it helps to I can't reach because I'm short, but to even put your feet on the ground kind of allows your body to align. And if you can, just put your shoulders back. Maybe move your head side to side. Were you feeling tense? Sometimes we carry stress in our shoulders. I just want to invite you to take 2 deep breaths on your own.